Hello and welcome. Let's go ahead and get started today. Quite a bit of information to cover, and I'm going to start out with really the top-down approach. I'm going to go relatively quickly through this process as we're still integrating with TradingView, and many of you are still getting comfortable with the user interface, and that is it's a bit of a grind sometimes to get comfortable with a new layout. I hope you're finding success with it, and I wanted to go through this just to create a little bit of repetition for this process. Number one, just recall that we're focusing on, or we're utilizing Discord as kind of that information hub. So when you're starting out, whatever that process is, that morning process, you can go in, log into your Discord, and there's going to be several updates that are happening here. And if you need some of the others, the refreshers or the indicators, those are all going to be right here. So you've got your screen training. I suggest always, if you're kind of lost, or if you're like, man, I can't remember where I needed to go from here, just go to the start here button and go to step 1 and step 2 and step 3. And by the time you've completed that, you're going to have a really good idea of what you need to go and where and how you're going to be implementing. The other thing I suggest doing is on that start here button, this top playlist, if you click on that playlist, this is going to take you out to a YouTube playlist, and it's got really all of the most recent videos that are the most relevant, and they go in order. And I actually rewatched them all last night, and they really are good. They really do explain as far as the process that you're going to need to understand and the implementation. And so I know that it's probably an hour's worth of video, but it's an hour's worth of training, and so utilize that. Obviously some of the stuff is going to not be relevant, and you just skip over that. But you may find it useful in terms of just a nice refresher and going through some of that information. Number two is your indicators, your information. Some of these videos I'm already making changes to and updating some of the things, at least on just the layouts, because there's always a few changes here and there. But for the most part, everything, the core information is all there. There's one thing I'm going to focus on today regarding the screens from the chart page, which we've covered in a lot of these other videos, and there's a couple of different kind of cool changes that we can utilize here as well. And then also the trade ideas. On the articles page, we're posting information out there just to give you some ideas that are coming from the screens. Sometimes you may not have the time or the ability during the day to run in and really focus on the screens. These are just some quick ideas of stocks that are moving and either in buy signals or already in muscle stock status in that overall uptrend. Okay, so that's where that information is. And remember, Discord is just the hub. It's just the location. The morning updates are there. These trainings, when they're posted, they're going to be there as well. So if you have some time that you're, want to go back in and you're finding that there's, a lot of times there'll be a little red dot or something over here to let you know that there's information that has been updated inside of those channels. I'm sure you're to that point by now. Anyway, let's go back here and starting out with that 30,000 foot view perspective. When we're looking at the market review tab, I'm going to save this one. This has got the trend indicator or the trend condition indicator. It's also got the momentum zone, Fibonacci snap tool, and the side-by-side chart setting with the 1 hour and the 1 day time frame. And we're looking for two different things on this. We're looking for three different things. We're looking for the momentum, we're looking for the breadth, and we're looking for the sentiment. Okay, so with momentum, we've got S&P price activity here. We're utilizing the momentum zones. So we're back into green. S&P 500 is in a bullish state, a trending state where it's gone to green. And in this case, in the trend, we're also above the 236 Fibonacci line, which is this Fibonacci line right here. Now this is connecting. This is the Fibonacci snap tool, which is this indicator. It's going to automatically grab the highest point and lowest point on the visible chart screen. So if you were to squeeze this in a little bit and get more data here, you're going to see that's connected here now, but it's going to pull in to whatever that price information is, whatever trend that it's finding on the screen. It's going to grab the high and the low point. So obviously you get different measurements depending on the trend that you're looking at. And I typically want to focus on just the last 6 months or so, and it'll grab the most recent significant low. And so we're looking at that. The other thing we want to look at is where are we at in the trend. We've got obviously momentum this way, but we also want to know what's the context to that trend. And we can do that two ways. We can look for the distance of the trend condition indicator, where we're looking at the spreading out or the expansion of trend, and then also the compression of trend. Okay, typically trends will have that. It's either going to compress and get ready to move and expand again, or expand to the downside. So we're looking for those things. Once we have an expansion of trend, we know that the probability of that trend expanding even further, more aggressively, it can still happen, certainly, but it more than likely not without some kind of a counter trend or correction. Now, during this overall uptrend, we've seen a lot of little hiccups here. So if we wanted to go out a little bit longer time frame and go out to that weekly time frame, now this gives us a good perspective here of S&P 500 trend, and then the state of that trend. Are we wide right now, or are we narrow in that trend? So we obviously know that we've had a really nice run up. Well, when that happens, oftentimes if we're focused on kind of that 45-degree angle of trend, well, markets just, they come up and they come back down, and they just get away from themselves a little bit here, but they need some consolidation. And when we get these really wide states, that can happen. So when we look at this, we can say, okay, we know we're in an uptrend, but we're at the upper end of this trend because this indicator is expanding, and it just doesn't expand forever without some kind of counter trend. It doesn't mean that it's going to reverse entirely, but it does mean that we could be in a situation that we're starting to slow or pause the trend. And this is just purely based on price momentum and price movement of the S&P 500. Let's go back to that daily chart. And then obviously over here on the 60-minute time frame, you're looking at that as well. You've got some supply and demand blocks right here that are those areas where you could be getting institutional buying and selling on the S&P 500. The other thing that we're looking at is we're looking at breadth here. Breadth is how many stocks are participating in this uptrend or downtrend. And we're looking for these ranges. We're looking for the lower end. We're looking for the upper end of that range to be the extreme. When we get that, we're really wide apart here, and we're pressing that 10 number, and we're pressing this 80 number on the upside, then those are areas where we can also get some reversal. And while we're transitioning through that, we're moving through a trending condition here. So right now we're sitting right at 56, which means that 56% of the S&P 500 is currently trading above the 50-day moving average. That's not bad. It's not great, but it's moving in a bullish direction. We can add that then to our initial analysis and say, what's our price trend movement? What is our breadth? Do we have participation in that trend? And then the third part is sentiment. In this case, we can utilize VIX for sentiment. You can see markets are kind of selling off right here. We're getting a real big downturn, at least the last 2 hours on S&P futures, and the VIX is corresponding the other direction. Okay, so it's already moved back to majority bullish just within the last hour, and so we're at that range where we can certainly see, knowing that where we at in this trend, we're very far extended. Is there, it's kind of waiting around to see when are we going to get some kind of catalyst that just blows this market up? And it hasn't happened yet, and it may not happen, but we want to watch for some of those indicators at this location. Okay, we're looking for that happening at that location. That's really the core of this initial setting, is where are we at in the trend? Are we at the upper end or at the beginning of the trend? And the reason why we focus on that is because we want to focus on our position sizing from there. That's going to help us determine, should we be long, should we be in cash, should we be, whatever the strategy is, should we be in equities at all? And we want to know the magnitude that we should be in equities. 20% in equities, 30, 40, 50, 100% in equities. Where are we at in the trend? Are we early in the trend? Are we late in the trend? That's the value of that big picture when we start to drill down into that. Now, the second chart layout that we're utilizing is the daily time frame. I'm going to pull this setting right up here as well. Now, this has got the two charts next to each other, the 60-minute and the 1 hour time frame. You've got your watch list over on the side, and this one is, I'm going to switch this one over to portfolio. So you can change, obviously, these here as well. So these are current open positions that were in the wheel portfolio, and so those are going to show up here as long positions. as well as we're looking through some of those. And then down here at the bottom, you've got your screen setters. Remember your screen settings. You've got your filters that are listed here, and those filter settings are, and this is the new buy all. Okay, we're going back to the new buys. If you're just the new buys, if you are new buys all, or if you're muscle stocks, or if you're buys, each of those are going to be over here in the screens, and these are going to explain how to set up those settings. For example, if I were to go out and grab the Google Doc here, it's just going to tell me, okay, here's the settings that I need. Here is the criteria, the setting, the volume, just the different settings that we've got set here. So then you can click on this, open it up, and say, oh, okay, I need to add, go back here and say I need to add this or that. Once you do this one time, then you don't have to do it anymore. It's just that initial time. And then from there, it's kind of fun just to kind of play around a little bit with some of these. While I'm here, though, I want to focus on one other piece. I'm not entirely sure when this was added or what level of TradersPro or TradingView access requires it, but it's right over here. And I believe that the options one as well, but this is the screener. So we talked about those screen settings that were not here. The nice thing about this is happening real time. Okay, this is every 46 seconds, every minute. This is refreshing, and it's going to look for the criteria every minute. So this can change. It's a little bit more dynamic. And also, one of the other fun things that I wanted to show you is, sometimes when we're looking at a chart pattern that looks like this, we get a real solid bar, and we're looking over here. Let's see if we can find a little bit better example. So this is a little bit better example. Not fantastic, but if we were to look right here and say, man, this is a confirmation move here. This is nice, but man, I would have liked to have gotten it just a tiny bit earlier. Is there a way to get just a little bit earlier signal, in this case on a 1 hour time frame? And the answer is yes, with a couple of tweaks, but a very simple thing to look at is take all of your same criteria and just go to this one where it says time interval and change that to 1 hour. Now your signal is based on the 1 hour bar instead of the daily bar, and it's going to search for those. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Okay, and see if we get any earlier indication here. This one not so much, but you can see it's now ticked back up to bullish, and this one right here as well. Let's see if there's anything. So there's really nothing super exciting in that match. But again, that's updating every hour. So you could even, whatever your strategy is, your time frame is, you can change up the setting there and get a real-time scan to say, hey, this thing is moving right now. This is giving me a signal right now. And like I say, these are kind of ugly, but that's a setting also. Just don't forget to change that back to daily. Otherwise, you'll be like, why do these look like they shouldn't be here? Okay, so this is the daily setting. That's still updating every minute and refreshing that way. But this now, one of the things we can do is if you want this setting, or at least to be able to take a quick scan, what I've been doing is I'll just change this one over from the 1 hour to the daily. Okay, and then when we open up that scan right here, and then you can go, now these are already saved to have your new buy all, or in this case, your new buy, just the new buys. So you've got 7 here, and you can see there's our 7 right there. So they're matching right now, but it's just a little bit different perspective. And when I click on these, now that's why I changed it over to that daily chart. I'm going to move this over just a little bit so we can see, so that now I can click on these, or I can even just mouse down these. Now you can see it's also over here on the side. It's doing the same thing. It's scrolling through, but it's pulling these charts in as well. So that's just one other way to get access to this screener, which you would have set up in this way. And if you don't want to add in these, which I think you should still, it's just a nice feature to have. I'm actually getting more and more comfortable with this setting over here, even knowing this one is right here. The nice thing with this one is you just get a little bit different perspective. For example, muscle stocks, you get the whole list, but then you can also add this chart view over here to where you've got, I want to do candles. And we want to go, let's go 6 months right here. So when we talked about this and some of the other trainings, then I can scroll through this and just look at the charts themselves and see if there's anything interesting that may jump out to you. Just one more slight change to be able to say this. I like this layout just a little bit better. It helps me see what I'm looking for faster. I already know what the criteria is, and the more you're focusing on those criteria, the more you already know what you're looking for. And so from here, it's just like, okay, now I can maybe scan through some of these and look just a little bit quicker. That's another option there that's pretty handy. Now in this case, I'm just going to go back to my 1 hour. And remember this, if you find that your chart is squished or messed up, down here in the corner, you can just click on this and it'll take you to where you're at currently. And then this A right here will reset it to fit to the screen. That A is auto fit. And so if everything looks kind of odd, you may just have to click on that A to get it matched up. And then click on, if you're scrolled way over here like this, there's usually going to be this little arrow, scroll to the most recent bar, and that's going to scan you back. That's kind of a crazy looking chart right here, but let's those are some of the functionalities there of this setting. Now you've got the new buys. So again, we're searching for these different criteria, and one of the things we can do is we can add in buy signals. One of the other nice things about this setting right here, though, is you could take, if I wanted to just sort by industry and just scan that and sort that by industry, I may be able to just see, okay, here's some leading industries, and it just groups them all together. And then I can say, I want to look at some of these stocks that are in this industry, and then I can scroll through and get that information. So just a little bit faster way to be able to utilize the screening functions and just get access to see the screen itself and see the chart. I always find that helpful, instead of just looking at the chart or looking at the output of the screen and not having any visual representation. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to do, and this may speed up that process. Obviously, that's a big number, 286 in the muscle stocks group. I may not need that as many. I can go to my new buy list and fine tune that. Again, there's plenty of other trainings now on that setup at this point. So just backtracking a little bit, let's go back to the new buys. Okay, so we're starting out with market conditions, market trends. One other thing sometimes that is helpful is if you duplicate, open up a second window, and then go to this market review tab, and then you've got both tabs open. And if you have the downloaded version as well, TradingView's downloaded version, you can add multiple tabs like this also, which is pretty slick. So again, top-down approach, market conditions. Where are we at in the trend? Am I adding anything new or not? Am I buying anything? Am I selling anything? What is the criteria? What are the market conditions? Are they conducive to a possibility of more bullishness, or is it a bit of a pullback? Again, it's more about risk, the risk management portion, and should we be going bullish? Should we be out of the market? Should we be bearish? That's our initial setting. Then from there, we can go into this setup and say, let's take a look at some stocks. Do we have any new buys that are interesting or attractive? Here's one. It's a nice clean signal. It's up about 20% early on. So if we were in pretty big volume. So if we were looking at this chart, one of the other things too that's kind of nice is you can take over here on the side and just get that watch list out of the way if you don't want it there. And so then you can analyze it from here and say, all right, let's take a look at this trade. Do we want to try and set up a trade? And we would be doing this after the market closes. But one of the nice things now is you could do this during the day if you wanted to. If you had a nice setup and it hadn't moved, maybe you're approaching the close. We're hour and a half away from the close, and say, I just don't want to wait till Monday. I'd rather set up the trade and get into it, which, if that's the case, then make sure you're following your trading plan and not just gunslinging because you don't feel like you can get to it on Monday. If there's a legitimate reason why you can take that trade now, then you could certainly do so. We want to then click on the buy button. We want to go into our limit order. We want to define our market or our position size risk. If we're at a 2% allocation and a 0.25 at risk as well, we can then define those parameters, 2,000 and 250. What that means is we've got $2,000 of our capital. In this case, we're using a $100,000 example. 2% of 100,000 is 2,000 with a stop loss, so that when and if we get stopped out of this trade, our max loss is going to be $250. That's ultimately the number that we want to really focus on is that number right there and say, this is the trade with my stop loss included. This is my position size without my stop loss. So I'm saying position size, I'm willing to risk $2,000 of my 100,000. And again, that number can change. You could say I'd rather have 10% or I'd rather have 5%, or in this case, 2%, 2.5% is quite conservative. And so if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, then just these are your two levers. I call them levers that you're pulling just because these are the things you can control. We really don't have much more control. We really don't have any control. We have the control on what we're looking for and why. That's the screen criteria. Okay, we know the rationale, we know the logic behind it, and that is we're looking for companies that are already growing. There's already interest there. There's institutional demand by big volume entering in this stock. It's moving in an upward trend from lower left to upper right. This gray line right here is the 200 period moving average. We get these ups and downs. It's moving higher, good confirmation bar. We want the confirmation bar because of exactly the name of it. It's confirming that somebody is buying. Okay, it's a strategy that, sometimes people will say, well, why don't you buy it right here? And say, well, you certainly can, but it's not the strategy we're looking for. It's a different strategy, and it absolutely is valid. But if we want a little bit more confirmation, the reason we want the confirmation, and this may be way more confirmation than we need, as long as it gives us a green bar and is back up and closes above some of those most recent highs. Okay, if it's breaking out of a most recent high, now you've got big volume. That's institutional money coming into the stock. That's what we want. Institutional sponsorship, just meaning the big boys are interested in this stock. We're not the big boys. We're just hanging along, holding on for dear life on the coattails of these big institutions. And that's fine. That's fine by me because I want that. I want a little bit more confirmation. Now, what does that confirmation do for us? Look where we can place our stop loss now. That stop loss is set at 730. And this stock, if we were to buy it right now, that stock would have to retrace all the way back down and give away and give back all of the gains that all of these guys just bought. Now, do you think they are going to be okay with that? They just barely bought into that. Maybe they're immediately all going to sell and it drops back down again. But that's the risk we're willing to take at this point, to say I'm willing to risk $250 that this thing is not going to get back to here anytime soon. That's always a possibility. Early on, and we know that's the case. It can, you get these big moves higher and big moves back down again. But we're willing. This confirmation bar is saying, I'm betting